What if the reason you feel lost isn't that your life is missing something? It's that you've been taught to look for the wrong thing entirely. There is a small fishing town on the coast of Shikoku, Japan, where the average lifespan stretches well past 90. Doctors assumed it was the fish, the clean air. But when researchers finally sat with the elders, almost none talked about health. They talked about a feeling, quiet, almost embarrassingly simple, that there was something worth getting up for that morning. The word for it isn't the point. What it does to a person is, Western self-help took that feeling and turned it into a worksheet. 4 circles, a downloadable PDF, a price tag. In packaging it, they lost the one thing that made it real. It was never meant to be found. It was meant to be lived into. This is the story of 2 strangers in Denver who signed up for the same 4-week class without knowing why and what they learned over 4 Saturdays about a code the Japanese have quietly practiced for centuries. If you'd rather sit with one true idea than scroll past 100 shallow ones, stay. Let's begin. Chapter 1. 2 strangers. One ache. Denver in early spring is unpredictable. Sun in the morning, snow by afternoon. Maya-chan was 26, a graphic designer who had bookmarked 43 articles on finding your passion and finished reading none of them. She had a 5-year plan she'd rewritten 6 times. What she didn't have was a single Tuesday that felt different from any other Tuesday. Across town, David Ruiz was 52, an accountant for almost 3 decades, married, 2 kids, grown and gone. By every measure his father cared about, David had won. And yet, most nights he sat in his driveway for 10 extra minutes before going inside, doing nothing, because he didn't know what to call the thing he was feeling. Neither knew the other existed. Maya found a flyer on a coffee shop bulletin board. David's niece texted him the link. "This made me think of you, Uncle Dave." Neither could explain why they signed up. They just did. I want to pause here, because this is probably where you are too. Maybe you're Maya, drowning in information, starving for application. Or maybe you're David, successful by every external measure, quietly wondering when enough arrives. Most people who feel purposeless aren't missing information. They're missing stillness. So here's your only homework for this chapter. In the last week, was there a moment where time passed and you didn't notice? Not productive, just present. Find it. You'll need it later. Chapter 2. The first lesson. The reason you rise. The class met in a converted warehouse loft in Reno. Exposed brick, 12 mismatched chairs, no slides. At 9 on the first Saturday, a woman named Sachiko Inoue walked in carrying only a cup of green tea. A retired philosophy professor, she ran this class twice a year because some ideas only survive if spoken aloud to people willing to sit still for them. She skipped introductions. How many of you can tell me, specifically, why you got out of bed yesterday? Silence. Someone offered, "My dog needed walking." Sachiko nodded. That counts. What else? Nothing. She told them what happened to that feeling in the West. Turned into a diagram, 4 circles promising an intersection of passion, skill, market, and money. Tidy, she said, and almost completely wrong. In Japan, it's a feeling you notice, not a formula. For a grandmother in Shikoku, it might be the 15 minutes her grandson visits on Sundays. Most of you don't lack a reason to rise. You were taught a reason only counts if it's impressive. She wrote one line on the whiteboard. It isn't found. It's noticed, in the middle of doing. That week, Maya found her 3 moments. An hour redrawing a logo no client asked for, a long call with her sister about nothing, a walk with no destination. David found his at the kitchen table. The garden at dawn. A spreadsheet problem he'd stayed late to solve just because, and 20 minutes restringing an old trumpet he hadn't touched since college. This is the same exercise for you. 3 moments from this past week where you were simply there. 1 is enough. Don't lose this paper. You'll need it at the end. Chapter 3. The second lesson. The road beneath you. On the second Saturday, Sachiko set down a small, worn wooden comb and asked who'd brought their 3 moments. Almost every hand went up. Good. Hold on to that. She introduced the path. Not the destination, the path itself. Western thinking treats a road as something that exists to deliver you somewhere, its value tied entirely to arrival. But nobody lives at the destination. You live on the road. Treat it as a waiting room and you'll arrive at 50 different somewheres and feel nothing at any of them. She asked the room a question and told them not to answer immediately. What would you be willing to keep doing for 10 years, with no guarantee anyone notices? In the hallway afterward, Maya and David finally spoke. 10 years, Maya said, half to herself. I used to play trumpet, David said out of nowhere. Haven't touched it in maybe 25 years. Why'd you stop? It wasn't the right time, with the kids, the mortgage. He stopped mid-sentence, hearing himself. It was never going to be the right time, was it? That's the trap Sachiko was naming. The path doesn't ask you to abandon your life. It asks you to stop switching roads every time a new method promises a shortcut. Depth only opens itself to people who stay long enough to feel its texture. Chapter 4. The third lesson, values you chose, or values you inherited, week 3. Sachiko waited longer than usual. Think of one major decision from the last decade. Did it come from a value you examined or one you absorbed without checking it? She talked about a code old samurai households raised children by, not to glorify swordsmanship, but because it made values conscious instead of automatic. Most people run on inherited software, what their family rewarded, what their culture expects. And until it's inspected, it isn't truly theirs. David felt that in his chest. His father had one rule: provide, don't complain. He'd never asked if he agreed. He'd just executed it for 30 years. Maya thought of her own choice to go into design because it's practical, a sentence she'd never tested against what she actually wanted. Over coffee, David admitted, I know exactly where my values came from. My father, work first, feelings later. Is that wrong? Maya asked. I don't know, he said. I know it was never mine. I never asked. Your exercise. List 5 values that actually govern your daily decisions. Next to each, write one word, inherited or chosen. That ratio is an honest photograph of how much of your life is actually yours. Chapter 5. The fourth lesson, mastery in the smallest thing. On the final Saturday, Sachiko brought a small ceramic teacup with a faint gold seam where it had been broken and mended. Remember this. We'll come back to it. The last idea was craftsmanship. Someone deciding to do one ordinary thing extremely well without an audience. She mentioned an elderly noodle maker in Tokyo who, after 60 years, still wakes at 4, thinking about how to make the dough slightly better than yesterday. Asked if he's happy, he doesn't really understand the question. The doing is the answer. This isn't about finding your grand purpose, Sachiko said. It's asking, what am I doing right now? And am I doing it with real attention or just enough to get by? She had them look at their sheet from week 1. Now overlay everything. Presence, the road you're willing to walk, the values that are genuinely yours, and the care you bring to the doing. Pick one small thing from that list that seems to be asking for attention. It's supposed to be small. Mastery always starts small. Viktor Frankl, who survived 4 concentration camps, observed that the prisoners who endured weren't always the strongest. They were the ones with something specific to live for. People can endure almost any how if they have a why. The Japanese arrived at the same truth without the suffering, through daily, ordinary practice. Chapter 6. What came after? Maya didn't quit her job. What happened was slower. She started spending 30 unpaid minutes a week sketching ideas with no client and no deadline. 6 months later, 3 of those sketches became a small personal project that, almost by accident, brought her new freelance work. But by then, that wasn't really why she was doing it. David took the trumpet out of its case one Sunday with no ceremony. He played for 20 minutes. His lips gave out fast. That's what happens after 25 years. He played again the next week and the week after. He didn't mention it to his wife for almost a month. When she asked what had changed, he thought, then said, "I think I stopped waiting for the right time." She was quiet, then said, "You always played beautifully." He played until nearly midnight that night, while she read in the next room. Nothing about David's life looked different from the outside, but something had shifted underneath. An agreement between the person who left for work each morning and the person who played quietly at night. They were finally the same person. The four ideas Sachiko taught aren't abstract philosophy. The reason to rise doesn't need to be impressive. It needs to be noticed. The road has value on its own. Your values aren't yours just because you've always held them. Only the ones you've examined belong to you. And purpose isn't a declaration, it's a practice, starting in the smallest thing you do with real care. Do you still have your piece of paper? Look at it again. What's written there isn't the start of a new life. It's the life you already have, just with your attention finally turned toward it. If this found you at the right moment, subscribe and leave it a like. It genuinely helps this reach the next person who needs to hear it. There's another video linked right now that goes deeper into how a single 90-day stretch can quietly rebuild a life from the inside out. Watch it, and more importantly, practice it. Because an idea you only watch is just more noise. Be present. Walk your own road. Until next time.